Hey, what's up, Wausome friends? Welcome back to another episode of Keep It Wausome. I got a really special guest for you today. I just want to give a quick shout out to my sponsors, Scotty's Ale House and Eatery, to Campbell Haynes Menswear, and to Verve Salon. So thanks you guys for supporting the show. And well, my guest today is Jerel Ballard. Now, everyone around here probably remembers him as the weekend anchor producer and reporter at WSAW Channel 7. You were on the morning show, right?
Yeah, that's 100% correct.
That's
Good
right.
times.
Yeah. And now is the communications director at Public Service Commission of Wisconsin and a founder and president of Milwaukee's finest scholarship foundation. I wanted to have you on the show because it just seems like you really did some awesome things since you left Wausau, and you did some pretty awesome things while you were here. But first off, I mean, we got to talk about the big news, the Milwaukee Bucks.
Yeah, it's great. I know, it's just being here in the city of Milwaukee, a lot of people are really excited. I mean, not just here, but across the state. So big shout out to the Milwaukee Bucks for their championship world title. It's exciting to have that here in Milwaukee.
Yeah, it had to be exciting to be in Milwaukee while this was happening. I mean, I know everyone around the state was excited. I watched more basketball in the last couple of weeks than I probably have in a year, and so I think it's great. Good on the Bucks. Glad to see them get that championship.
Absolutely.
And looked a little rough there with 2 games down.
Yeah, but that's not the first time that the Bucks were 2 games down and they turned it around for the remaining of the series. So and like you, I definitely got more in tune to watching Bucks games or just basketball in general. So that was a good way to get us involved.
Well, I kind of want to go now. When did you first come to Wausau?
I first came to Wausau directly after college, maybe about 4 months or so after college, in 2018. So I believe it was September of 2018, and then I was with Wausau for about 2 years, all the way up until 2020.
What was your time like in Wausau? What was the experience of being a reporter in Wausau coming from outside the city?
Yeah, so even though I am a Wisconsinite, born and raised here in the city of Milwaukee, I didn't really know anything about the state of Wisconsin past Milwaukee. So it was really cool to get that firsthand experience of all of the different communities in north and central Wisconsin, all the way up to Rylander and everywhere in between from Stevens Point. I just learned so much about the different communities and all that Wisconsin has to offer. And it was exciting. Yeah, it was great.
I always wonder about new young people coming to town, and one of the stories I'm working on now for this week, actually for this week's City Pages, is where have all the YP groups gone? There were all these young professional groups in the 2015 to 2017 range, and then they just seemingly just about all disappeared. The United Way's Emerging Leaders is still around, and the Hmong Young Professional Group, which doesn't use, neither of those use young professional in their title. Those are still around, but all the other ones are gone. And I just wonder what it's like. What was it like for a young person? Because I know I hear from a lot of people that they have trouble connecting.
Yeah, maintaining and keeping, I guess you can say, young people in the area was definitely something that I remember covering as a reporter, but also just being young. For people who watch TV news, you see a lot of turnover. And I don't think that's just a north central Wisconsin. I think it might be a Wisconsin, opportunity across the board. I don't like saying issue. It's just a challenge.
Yeah.
It's a challenge for the state of Wisconsin. And, I even went outside of the state to get my college education, primarily just because I didn't see the opportunities here in the state. But I do think that Wisconsin is starting to make those changes to, keep younger people here in the state of Wisconsin.
Yeah, I want to ask you too some of the differences between Milwaukee and Wausau as far as opportunities for young people and maybe socialization or some of those networking opportunities. I know a lot of people hate the word networking, and I'm not it kind of gives me the heebie-jeebies too, because it just seems kind of, I don't know, ingenuine, I guess. But
Yeah.
I mean, just for a lack of a better word, kind of those opportunities for meeting other people, maybe close to your field or even outside of your field. Do you feel like there's a big difference between the two cities? Do you think the YP, the idea of the young professional groups are kind of going away in both communities?
I think there's a need across the board. Obviously, there's going to be young people here in the city of Milwaukee looking for networking opportunities or career moves. But there's young people in Wausau too. And I think it just really takes someone to hold that glue together and push that movement forward. Because one thing I did learn about living in North Central Wisconsin is that all of the communities, they love new ideas and they want to bring those new ideas to the city or to the village or the township that they're in. It just really takes that one person to get that idea off the ground and then being consistent with it so it continues.
Yeah, for sure. Well, while we back up a little bit, I kind of want to hear about how you got into journalism, how you became interested in it, and what was that? What was the perception versus reality of the job too? That's always interesting.
Yeah. So it's actually interesting. I first learned that I wanted to be a journalist when I want to say, a freshman in high school. I was
Mhm.
participating in extracurricular activities, and one of the programs I was in had, a reporter there covering the story. There was an event, and I was always intrigued by, how they conducted the interview, and just being on TV is cool, so that interests me. And then as I went into my high school career, I started doing the morning announcements for my high school, which really interests me more. And then I was also just very interested in a lot of different things. I couldn't really figure out, what topic I would like to focus on in college. So I looked at what career could I take public speaking, take something where I'm learning multiple different things in a short period of time, and then putting that information back out into the world. I did a career cluster chart, and it said broadcast journalist, and I was like, well, I'll go to college for this. And ever since then, it was like, wow, this is a great career, a fun opportunity.
So you took one of those tests and it was actually accurate, huh?
Yeah, and it was a mentor that actually had me take the time, sit down, do the test, and really truthfully answer each question. So it was great.
And you spent some time as a print reporter too. I think was it a Columbia Chronicle? I saw you were
Yep.
freelancing there.
Yep. I did a little bit of freelancing for the Columbia Chronicle, which is the school newspaper at my college campus. So yeah, that was a great opportunity as well.
You must have felt more drawn to the TV lens, huh?
Yeah, it was something about being able to get really creative with the camera. The camera is like your third eye for me. So, especially being an MMJ, a multimedia journalist, having to go out and tell a story, and all you have is you, your person, and this camera. How creative can you get? That was always a challenge, and every day it was a challenge to try to captivate our viewers in a new, exciting way to keep them coming back, but also so they believe you as a journalist. They want to hear more about you and the story that you're telling.
So were you someone who was comfortable with the camera right away, or that takes some doing? Because I've been doing YouTube videos now for most of this year, and I found it's the first few were painful. And I remember before when I was at the Stevens Point Journal and they had us start doing videos, man, I was like, how did these TV guys do this? I'm so terrible at it. I would fumble my words, and it was just a nightmare.
Right. I think there's always, that fear factor. There's always
Mhm.
that I'm nervous factor. That doesn't really go away. Naturally, when I first started out, I was like, man, this is, kind of intense because you're already coming into the business where there's people, who have been in the business for years. So you want to make sure that they believe in your ability to report. But then also you have to have that internal belief. But I think as time goes on, you naturally, especially as a reporter on deadline, which I'm sure you're familiar with, you actually sometimes don't even have time to think about how nervous you are because you're
Right.
on that deadline. So you just have to go shoot from the hip, and just see how it goes.
So did it take a little time to get used to it, or did you have sort of a natural proclivity to it?
Having that I was doing it since high school, I, I did have that I would say I kind of had that natural factor.
Nice.
But of course, there's always things that I could work on to improve.
Yeah,
Yep.
definitely. Definitely. So you must have enjoyed that more than print journalism.
Yeah. Yeah, I would
Yeah.
say.
So I had seen you spend some time in the Hill too. Tell me about that experience. That must have been interesting.
Oh, Capitol Hill in DC. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I was a junior in college, I got a great internship on Capitol Hill in Washington, DC. And I actually also interned for a public relation law firm in Washington, DC called Global. It was a great opportunity. I got to work directly with US Senator Durbin. I did some speech writing. I did a lot of, media relations, constituent relations. That was an overall really great experience to understand how our nation works, how the law
Mhm.
works, and just also hearing people's stories day to day and helping them with their issues or any concerns that they may have. So that was a great experience. I was
Yeah,
there for
tell me more about
almost a
the.
year.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. I cut you
Yeah,
off.
I was just gonna say I've been there for almost a year. I was there for almost a year. So yeah.
Wow. What was, I mean, just what was it like being in Washington, working in Washington? I mean, that must have been something.
Yeah, it was amazing. In fact, I was there on a full ride scholarship from the Fund for American Studies, and you're living and working on Capitol Hill, and just being there, I was shocked to see how many young professionals are there. First of all, of course, a lot of the lawmakers might be older, but they're staffers. They're young,
Yeah.
recent college graduates, and they're moving the country and they're getting things done. So that was very inspiring to see.
That didn't make you want to make you want to stay on the Hill though, huh?
I would have. I love DC. I would
Oh,
have stayed. But I was also there my junior year, so I had to come back and finish college. And when I came back, the goal was to go back to DC. But
oh,
then naturally, Channel 7 came calling, and that's
oh,
kind of how
really?
that kind of took a turn. So yeah.
So that must have had it must have had an impact on you. You were definitely had your eyes set on the Hill, huh? On
Right.
Capitol
And,
Hill.
just seeing what I would do, maybe be a staffer for a lawmaker or something of that sort. So yeah.
But so now you left when you left Channel 7, you kind of took a different route. You didn't go back into journalism. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so directly after I left Channel 7, that was the very beginning of the pandemic. So finding a TV job was a little bit scarce just because a lot of stations had like a hiring freeze.
Yeah, can we
And
pause for a second and talk
yeah,
about how much it sucked to be a reporter during the pandemic?
I mean, luckily I was not so much of a reporter because I left right when it got started.
So
I
you
think I,
just before it, huh?
man, I just left, I
Yeah.
believe it was maybe less than 30 days before that mask mandate came about.
Oh, wow.
And I was always thinking like, wow, I'm so happy I don't have to report with a mask on and, have to hold this long stick to get stories.
Yeah, it was
There was
hard.
that.
I ran into some of your colleagues throughout the pandemic, and I thought, man, I feel so bad for you guys because like I can just call up someone on the phone and get a
Right.
story. If you
Yeah.
guys gotta like, you gotta get camera time. So like
And it was
during
a
this,
whole transition.
yeah, so
Yeah.
during an era when
Because,
you can't actually see people in person,
right.
wow.
Exactly. Yeah. And, figuring out how do we take something that's supposed to be appealing for the eye, but
Mhm.
we can't get people on camera. And how do we still make it appealing for the eye? A lot of graphics I saw,
Yeah,
a
way
lot of
too much
photos.
B-roll.
That's all we could do, right?
Yeah.
So, and then of course, the endless talk of COVID-19 and the death rate and all of that came with the pandemic, nonstop day in and day out. So, yeah, that was an interesting time.
No,
It's
what?
still kind of ended in a way.
So it wasn't COVID that prompted you to leave, though.
I think that played a factor.
Oh, did.
Yep, I think COVID
Mhm.
19 definitely played a factor just because of I had I had a few offers in different cities, but I was also really interested in getting back to my hometown and doing some work here. And that's when I ended up getting offered a position with the chief of police in Milwaukee, doing marketing and communications. So I figured, this is still part journalism. You're sending out press releases, keeping the community informed. And I also wanted to challenge myself to see if I would be able to handle, a job of that level. So I decided to challenge myself there.
What was that like?
It was an interesting time
Yeah.
because shortly after I joined with MPD, we had the death of George Floyd.
Mhm.
And then there was also an incident here in Milwaukee with Joel Acevedo. And that officer, who had a party. We don't have to go into all of that
Yeah.
detail, But, we had some similar situations here in the city of Milwaukee. And, being on the marketing and communications side of things, that was something that we were constantly dealing with the Milwaukee Police Department. And it was challenging, but, we had the civil unrest that we had to deal with on top of the pandemic. And people didn't really view the police department or their employees very highly at that time. So that was also, a new challenge for me, going from being the reporters reporting on these stories to now putting out the information that reporters use to tell their stories.
It must have been interesting being in Milwaukee at that time, because I mean, Milwaukee, and I think I was telling you before the podcast, like my family's from Milwaukee. I've had plenty of friends there. I go and visit, and it must be interesting though, because it's such a segregated city.
Very much so.
Like, for example, one of my friends lived in the River West area, and so I would walk from her, sometimes in the morning I'd go visit her, and I'd walk from her house to the Collectivo that was about 8 blocks away. And it was like for 4 blocks, I would see nothing but Black people.
Mhm.
And then I cross a street, and all of a sudden it was nothing but white people.
Right.
Like, it's crazy. You just can't
Exactly.
imagine something like that in Wausau.
Correct. Yeah, it's very distinctive that way. The South Side, the North Side, the East Side, um, it's all very segregated. And I guess there's tons of research as far as how the city got to be this segregated. I do know that that's something that, local officials are working to try to break down and bridge that gap. And that was, I guess, one thing that made the Bucks win so great, because it provided all these common spaces for people to interact in a way that the city doesn't usually get to interact.
Yeah, it's great. Kind of brought everybody together over a
Mhm.
shared cause.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Well, I mean, it must have been an interesting time. We're also working in a police department when George Floyd happened.
Yeah. I remember, as a reporter, you still do ride alongs, right? But I've never been in a ride along the way that I've been in ride alongs when I was working for the chief of police. There was one time, I believe it was the first night of civil unrest, and the chief, had to go out and, you know, surveillance the area with his team, and I did a ride along, being a marketing and communications officer, and I was, managing the Twitter page at the time. They gave me a bulletproof vest because you never know what you're going to run into when there's protests all over the city.
That's
Um,
reassuring, right?
yeah, that was reassuring. But it was just a very interesting experience. And that's, a level of experience that a regular reporter probably wouldn't, have access to, because of safety reasons. But it was a very interesting time.
Yeah, what was that like? I mean, people shouting stuff, or people
Yeah,
saying anything? Anyone throw anything at you guys, or?
I don't think I didn't catch anyone throwing things directly at the chief of police or our vehicles. For the most part, we did see a lot of peaceful protests on the first night
Mhm.
of civil unrest. It was more so when the sun went down later on in the afternoon or in the evening, that, there were incidents where police had to use maybe force or whatnot. Um, to get the situation under control. But it was also a very busy time for the police department because we were still unsure on whether or not the DNC was actually really happening in Milwaukee, the Democratic National
Oh
Convention.
yeah.
So that was also on the top of our mind while dealing with the pandemic and the civil unrest.
So where'd you go from there? Where'd you go from the police department? Was that right to the
Right,
PSC, or?
yep, right to the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin. So I was with the police department, and then I was offered an amazing position for the Public Service Commission as their communications director, and that's currently where I am now. And for those who might not know what the Public Service Commission does for the state of Wisconsin, they regulate all state utilities. So anything to do with increased rates, anytime there is new infrastructure being built for transmission lines, all of that is regulated through the PSC. And I help send out those press releases to keep everyone informed on when they may not see a transmission line project in their neighborhood. Um, I'll just say this was also another challenge because going from the
Mhm.
police department to utility regulation, this is not something that I was like, wow, utility regulation. I had to
Right.
learn, and I'm still learning a lot about broadband and broadband coverage maps and all of that good stuff. So that was also a good learning experience.
Yeah, I was going to say broadband is one of the things I bet a lot of people don't think about when it comes to the PSC, but I know like
Very high topic.
Marathon County right now has been coordinating a lot of rural broadband grants with various providers
Right.
helping them apply to the PSC for those grants. And I think that's what Oneida County did to build out their broadband. So it's nice to see that. It's nice to see that finally happening. I think I wrote that that's probably what they should do in 2017 or 2018,
Yeah.
but they get around to it eventually.
Right. Governor Evers declared the year 2021 as the year broadband access.
Yeah.
And there has been, a lot of resources, state and federal resources, going to get people connected. I know the state has a goal of 100% connectivity by 2025. So they're working towards that goal. We have broadband expansion grants. We have the ARPA funding grants, 100 million, I believe, the governor allocated for broadband access. So there's a lot of resources to get all of the areas in between Wausau to, Stevens Point, every dead spot, try to get those connected as soon as possible.
That's good. Yeah, it's been pretty bad in Marathon County for a while, and
I remember.
yeah, I mean even the 911 service. I think
Yeah.
that was starting to pop up just before you left. It's like there's all
Mhm.
these places that can't even dial 911.
911.
That's pretty scary.
Right. And I was gonna say something and I just went over my head. But it
Sorry,
will
man.
probably come back to me.
Well, so it sounds like you've made this move into public relations. Do you see yourself staying there? Do you think your TV days are done, or might there be a
I
resurgence?
I would say the whole world is my oyster.
Yeah, that's so.
I think there's I love to stay at a position anytime that I see growth, personal growth. And that doesn't necessarily mean I move when I feel like I'm done growing. But if there's always room for me to learn, then that's where I will probably be so I can continue to better myself and, help others who are on their way moving into my current position or so on. So yeah.
So I want to talk about this the excuse me, yeah, the Milwaukee's Finest Scholarship Foundation, because I love how on your Facebook you say you list yourself as philanthropist, journalist, and communications specialist, and
Yep.
philanthropist first. I like that. Tell me
Yep.
about the scholarship.
Milwaukee's Finest Scholarship Foundation is like my baby. I believe I've heard my mentor say this, but it's kind of like the longest relationship that I've ever been in. So I started the Milwaukee's Finest Scholarship Foundation when I was 21. I was a senior in college,
Wow.
and I was just about to graduate, and I was so excited. In fact, I was interning on Capitol Hill going into my senior year, and I was thinking about all of the opportunities that I was able to get, thanks to a $1,000 scholarship that I was given. And granted, I received other scholarships prior, but it was one $1,000 scholarship that was sent to me directly that I was able to use for transportation so I can stay in school. And I was thinking about that and I was like, well, you know what? I want to start a scholarship foundation and kind of do the same thing for other students who might be $1,000, $2,000 short just for books, transportation, laptops, whatever they may need.
This
Yeah.
is pretty amazing. I just want to point out because I don't know many 21-year-olds who started a scholarship fund.
Yeah, it was really cool. And at first I thought people were gonna tell me I was crazy because I didn't come from a rich family, so I wasn't like you know taking out of my trust fund to do this. But it was definitely something where I sat down with some of my past educators, some my parents. I said I want to do this. Everyone said that was a great idea. And here we are 5 years later, $50,000 given out to students, more than 50 students in college across the country. It's just really grew into this fully breathing foundation that's just exciting to see.
Wow. I mean, what did it take to start a fund? I wouldn't even know what the first thing to do that is.
Well, I started with just the vision. I was like, well, what do I want to call it? Obviously, I cared a lot about Milwaukee because I'm Milwaukee raised, so Milwaukee's finest. And then I just thought about the criteria, and I wanted it to be accessible scholarship for all students, not just those who have 4.0s. So I tried to develop a criteria that allowed students who might have that 2.7 GPA, but they still have a fighting chance against a 4.0 student, because we know that sometimes you can be a 2.7 student. I was like a 2.7 student, but you can still
Me too.
achieve your goals. Right. And that's important to realize, that if you could run for student body president in high school with a 2.5, at some high schools you can, you should also be able to apply for a scholarship. And most scholarships have that 3-point GPA, and it leaves a whole group of students behind. So I just thought about the criteria, and then I started fundraising.
Yeah, tell me about that part of it, because I mean that's another thing I wouldn't know, especially at 21. I definitely wouldn't have any idea what to do, how to do something like that.
Yeah, so it originally started with creating, I guess my college would call it a creative posse, but it was the board of trustees. And I got people who believed in the vision. And I said, this is what we're trying to do as a board member. This is your expected contribution. Would you want to do that? Everyone said yes. So, right there, starting off the bat, we had a pool of funds to work with. And then we started hosting events, like charity events with silent auctions. We started doing interviews with local news. The Milwaukee Journal Sentinel did an amazing story when we first got started, and that brought in more dollars. And then just the momentum and the support of our average donor is only $25. So to go from $25 per person to now having more than $50,000 raised, that's a lot.
That is a lot.
And it just was basically word of mouth and social media that really did it.
Wow, that's really amazing.
Yeah.
Uh,
And of course, obviously, I have to give a shout out to some of our sponsors, because it's not just the individual donors. We have had individual businesses back us. But as far as like a major, company, giving us $100,000 a year, that hasn't happened. We have, businesses sponsor individual students for whatever reason. So
that's really incredible, man.
it is a fun ride, still going strong. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you must have had I think I saw on your Facebook, I think you must have had some sort of event for it recently, huh?
Yep. So this year, 2021, we're celebrating our fifth anniversary. So it was our fifth year providing scholarships to students. Each year, we give on average about 10 students a scholarship. And every year at Milwaukee City Hall, we have those students come. They get honored with a certificate from the mayor. They get one of the awards that you might see behind me. They get, all of the recognition that comes with being a Milwaukee's finest scholar. They get to meet some of their donors. They get to talk on the stage and talk on the stage and talk on the stage, and say whatever they would like. And then, it was a really great turnout this year. I know CBS 58 came and did a story on us. So it was fun.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah. And just, I'll also add, this year, on average, we have about 80 students from throughout Milwaukee County apply. This year, despite the pandemic, we had more than 150 students apply from throughout Milwaukee County, um, which made us one of the most competitive scholarships to get. But it also spoke to the need of funding despite the pandemic. So, yeah.
So you must have some great success stories through that, huh?
Yeah. So this being our fifth year, our very first scholarship recipients from 2017 graduated this year, which was exciting. We have, students at local universities like MSOE, UWM, UW-Madison. We have a ton of students there, but we also have students at like HBCUs like Howard University. We have students at Harvard, Princeton. We have a student going to Princeton this
Wow.
year. So they're really scattered all over the place. We have two scholars in California, both attending two different schools, both graduates from two different classes, but one graduated last year and went to California, had no friends or family. And they reached out to the foundation and they said, hey, I don't have no one in California, but I know that there's another Milwaukee's finest scholar out here. Can you put me in contact with them and we can get lunch? And that's what they did. And now they have, this partnership all the way across the country through the Milwaukee's Finest Scholarship. So, yeah.
Wow, that's a great story. It
Yeah.
must be so rewarding to see, especially you have the first people now graduating school.
Yeah. And they grew up so much. Like, I know you can think of when you were a senior in high school and what you were from a freshman to all the way to senior year of college, and watching their growth over the years. For many of them, I'm LinkedIn friends or Facebook friends with them, and I'm watching them grow, watching them do extracurricular activities. And I mean, they really grow up to not only want to give back to the community from which they came or the community that they're living in, but they're also still reaching their goals, going to school to become lawyers, doctors, educators, veterinarians. They're all over the place.
There must be something for you to like to see all the success with it and realize that you started this and started it at such a young age too.
Yeah, it makes me want to keep going. And even during the year when we're fundraising, because of the pandemic, we didn't get to have a scholarship award reception in 2019, or was that 2020? In 2020, and we also haven't had a charity event in the last 2 years. So somehow, still being able to find the support to continue to do it when we haven't had those big events has been great, and we're still able to make that happen.
So I mean, you sound like you have a pretty full and awesome life there in Milwaukee.
To the best of my ability.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you ever miss journalism?
I do. I do. And, I often tell myself that a little bit what I'm doing now is still kind of journalism, because sometimes you'll put out a press release, and depending on the station or the reporter, they might just use word for word.
Right.
So in a way, you're vicariously telling the story through another person. But, obviously there's that certain spark or rush or thrill that comes with being on deadline and telling the story, and physically being in the moment, that I don't think any other profession can kind of give you.
Yeah, it's kind of a rush, isn't it?
Right, right. I got that
Yeah.
a little bit when I was with MPD, but once again, I wasn't an actual sworn officer, so they probably
Right.
got that rush or thrill a little bit more than I did.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I always wondered if I missed it if I left it. I think I would.
I think a lot of people do miss it, and once they leave. But I also think it really depends on your long term goals. The industry is changing so much, and it has
Yeah.
changed a lot, and the pandemic has definitely changed it even more. In figuring out new ways to get creative with telling stories. Do you actually need a camera person, or is this something that you can kind of put together on a cell phone? And trying to figure out how to cover as many things in a short period of time, when people are getting their news from multiple different outlets, not just sitting down and watching the five. They get it from Facebook, they get it from Twitter. How can we get this information out? So I guess when you look at people's long-term goals, because it's so fast paced and you're always on the go, if you're trying to have a family or something, that's something that people have to take in consideration if they want to.
Yeah, it's a job with a lot of burnout.
Right.
And a lot of the jobs have disappeared. I mean, I worked in the sports department at the Daily Herald. That was 15 years ago, and
Yeah.
like they don't have a sports department anymore. And I remember when I job shadowed there 15 years ago too, and like I don't think any of the reporters I met with that day are even in journalism anymore.
Yeah.
And one or
I mean,
two might be, but
yeah, it definitely changes, and it changes fast, and you have to keep up with the times for sure. But I
yeah.
guess you can argue it keeps you young.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's never boring.
Right.
I shouldn't say that. Some of those meetings get pretty boring after you sit there for 3 hours,
Right.
but generally speaking, it's like, you're going to have something different every day. It's like,
We
you
would be
don't
in the
really,
same room sometimes. Just they're like, okay, this council meeting gotta hurry up a little bit, right? So
yeah, I always felt bad for you guys because it's like, they go late and late and then you guys would have to try to throw something together for the 9 o'clock or whatever, the 10 o'clock.
15 minutes.
Yeah.
Send it back to the newsroom.
Maybe doing the look live in front of the city
Absolutely.
hall or something. Yeah. Well, it's interesting too. Like I know Wausau is sort of a transition market for a lot of reporters. It's usually a lot of folks seem to get their first jobs here, or maybe their second on their way up to a bigger market, and that's always interesting too because I used to joke that there was always a new TV reporter every time I went to a meeting. And sometimes it does feel like that. I know you were one of the folks that stuck around a little while. I saw you quite a bit, and some other ones too. But that's always an interesting dynamic because it's like there's always like a constant turnover, trying to like a new reporter trying to get used to the community and learn the ins and outs. And it must be a challenge. I mean, that must have been a challenge for you, even coming to town. It's like you have to get to know a whole new city, whole new group of people. And
Understanding how large the state of Wisconsin is, with all of the different townships and municipalities that there are, uh, it was like, wow, I had no idea. Once again, just anything past Milwaukee was like green grass to me.
right.
I might have heard of, obviously, I heard of Stevens Point because UW Stevens Point was a school that I was looking at when I was looking at colleges. But anything past that in Madison was like, what what's really there? And I really got to experience the best of, Wisconsin, whether that's going to Rib Mountain, home of the Hodag Music Festival. Like, I became a lot more cultured, and I learned how to understand Wisconsin a lot better.
Yeah, I sometimes think Wisconsin's almost like two
It
states. It's
is.
like the Madison, Milwaukee area and everything else.
Yep. That's why I'm really hoping for a plug for a high-speed train throughout the state, only because it will allow people to explore more than just a certain part of the state. They can have easy access to different parts.
Yeah, I wish more people could experience how nice trains are. Like they just make everything so much more efficient. I spent a
They
lot of
are
time in Japan, and like the you just get
nice.
everywhere by train. You wouldn't need a car. You probably wouldn't want one. Like it's just so much easier to get around. Just hop on the train and go to where you're going, and then you end up walking a lot more too. So you get in better shape. And
Right.
I think it'd be great if we had those here, but not everyone
But
agrees,
that
I guess.
carbon emissions, cut those in
That
half.
too. Yeah,
Right.
that's going to be an issue coming up.
Hmm.
Already is really.
Yeah. So
Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder if, I don't see anything that's really going to change the Wausau status as sort of a transition market for TV. Like I think that's pretty much going to be, I don't know anything that would change that. It's just the market is what it is, right?
yeah, I would say that the market is what it is. But you never really know with, all of these big heavy name players, Hearst Television, Great Televisions, the owners of your local stations. Who knows? Someone might get creative and try to figure out how they could, now you have Spectrum News, which covers the entire state, and they have different offices set up throughout the state so they can cover everything. Um, Never really know how the news industry could evolve.
That's true.
uh, and it might kick Wausau up to a larger market. Obviously, the more interest you have in Milwaukee, the more interest you'll probably have across the state, especially for tourism. And when you get more people visiting the state, your market goes up. So, yeah.
It's true. That'd be interesting to see. So, yeah, what's in the future for you? What are you looking forward to?
Yeah. Well, obviously, I'll continue to do Milwaukee's finest, raising money to send students to college. Once again, I don't think I mentioned those were 1,002 scholarships up to $2,000 each for
Gotcha.
those students, but I'll continue to do that. Continue my work with the Public Service Commission, and the whole world is my oyster. So we will. Yeah, that's a hard question to answer. But
Maybe,
yeah,
maybe we'll see you back in journalism one day.
it's a yeah, it's a possibility. I rule out nothing. So
Hmm. What's the
yeah.
big one down there? TMJ4. I think that's their big news station.
Yep.
That's one
We
of
have
them.
TMJ4, WISN 12, CBS 58, and Fox 6. And then now Spectrum News 1.
Yeah, quite a few options. Who knows? Maybe one of
Yeah,
them will. Maybe one of them will lure you back in.
maybe. We'll have to wait and see. But I've only been out of the business for what, a little over a year, maybe a year
Yeah,
and 4 months. So literally the span of this pandemic. So now, since everything is like somewhat getting back to normal, um, we'll see what the news industry looks like.
yeah. Well, if you do go back, just don't drop a camera on your first day.
Right. I will
I,
try not to.
I
I've
know
dropped.
someone who did that first
Yeah.
day.
First day. Wow.
Yep, and they were out the door. That's rough.
I dropped maybe one or two cameras when I was at WSAW, not to the point where it was like completely destroyed. And I did water damage another. However, that was able, I to believe, went into a big bag of rice or some sort. I gave it over and they fixed it. Those were
Wow.
never good conversations to have.
Yeah, I bet that was That probably wasn't a fun day for you.
Well, especially when you're on deadline and your camera stops working.
Yeah.
Like, and on average, we're driving an hour to, to a story. No one's bringing you equipment.
Right.
So how are you gonna get yeah, you gotta get it done. So
That's rough. Well, Jerel, it's great having you on the show today. Anything you want to shout out, or anywhere people want to find you? Is anywhere they should look?
Well, Brian, thanks for having me onto the podcast. It was great having this conversation with you. I miss working with you as a colleague.
Me too.
And yeah, I would just say, if anyone is interested in reaching out or connecting with me, Jerel Ballard is the best way to do that on Facebook. My like page is still active. Or you can just go out and directly contact me through the Public Service Commission, which is just my first and last name at wisconsin.gov, Jerel.Ballard. Or just contact me through Milwaukee's Finest. Our website is www. M as in Mary, F as in Frank, Milwaukee's Finest Scholarship, S as in Sam, and then F as in Frank.org.
There you
So
go.
yeah, there you
We'll
go.
put that in the description too
Perfect. Thank you.
for you. But yeah. One other thing I was going to ask you before I let you go. Were you named after
Yeah.
Superman's dad?
I get asked that a lot. My parents have told me no.
Gotcha.
However, sometimes depending on who's asking, I say yes. But I think that's pretty cool. I think he might spell it a little bit differently.
I
Doesn't
think he
he?
might. I had a friend that I worked with back when I was really young and worked at Target. His name was
Okay.
Jerel, and his parents were huge Superman fans.
Okay.
So that's
Awesome.
why I asked, because I know that was Superman's dad's name.
I got that, and my middle name is Austin. So a lot of people ask me about Austin Powers. Got that a lot growing up.
Ah,
So
they went that route and not the city, huh?
yeah, yeah. Oh yeah,
Interesting.
that too. Yeah. Yep.
Well, cool. Well, Jerel, it was great talking with you today. Thanks for being on the show, and good luck with everything. Sounds like you got your hands full and a lot of irons in the fire, but it's good to see.
Well, thanks for having me, and I guess we'll talk soon. I got to make another trip up to North Central Wisconsin.
Heck yeah. I tell all my guests to keep it Wausome, so keep it Wausome, Jerel.
Keep it awesome. I
All
love
right,
it.
you guys keep it
All right.
Wausome out there too, and we'll see you next time.